Good morning. Welcome to King's Report News Hour for the fourth day in the 12th month, 16th year. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king, Attorney Kyung Jae-moon. And let's go right to our sojourn around the kingdom right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 38 degrees and cloudy. Getting up to 50 degrees today with sunny skies, cloudy this evening at a low of 28 during the night. Father's hometown, Cheongju, still in this bitter cold. I really wonder how the people there can survive. Right now, 1 degree on the Fahrenheit scale, and that's a real feel of 5 degrees below zero. 4 degrees below zero is minus 20 on the Celsius scale. So it is cold, and there the temperature tonight will get down to 7 degrees below zero on Fahrenheit, and tomorrow cold with hazy sun, high of 22 degrees. And in at the Cheongung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, they've got snow starting in a little over 10 minutes, intervals of cloud, but not a lot of snow, very little. Intervals of clouds and sunshine with a flurry around. A major winter storms this weekend will cause significant travel disruptions, it says. So get your shopping done, I guess. High of 43 degrees today. Tonight, partly cloudy and low of 15. Excuse me. And in Limestone County, Texas, at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground, 46 and mostly cloudy right now. Breezy this morning, otherwise mostly cloudy, high of 62. Tonight, cloudy and low of 50. And at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 26 degrees, mostly clear. Getting down to 16 degrees tonight. Cold, increasing cloudiness this evening, followed by low clouds late tomorrow, mostly cloudy and not as cold, high of 43. And at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, also below the freezing point, clear and 29 right now, getting down to 22 degrees tonight, clear and cold tomorrow, sunshine mixing with some clouds, high of 46. Guangzhou, Guangdong, China, 47 degrees. Well, yesterday at 47, they had what was it, a yellow warning or something like that, 47 degrees. But today, I guess they're used to it now. They've toughened up in the last 24 hours. Okay, so it's cloudy and 47 degrees right now, and low of 47 tonight. So it looks like there's no warning out. Tomorrow, hazy sun, high of 60 degrees. Well, good. People in Guangdong province are not tough. Yes, they can get through it. 47 degrees. All right, let's see. Uh, Now we are in Earthly Life in the Spirit World, Chapter 3, Section. What is this now? Section 3, Chapter 3, Section 3, point 10. Point 10. So it says here, Father speaking January 21st, 1991. When you go to the spirit world, you'll be flying. Angels are traditionally depicted as having wings, and I think this is because uh, people saw them. Spiritually open people could see angels sort of flying around, and they figured they had wings. But and for example, Gabriel, when Gabriel comes to meet Mary, if you look at the artist's rendition of that scene, Gabriel has wings. But in reality, I think Father's saying that not really. It's just that they're able. Gravity doesn't really work in spirit world. I think that's the situation, and so they can move around without wings. Okay. So when you go to the spirit world, you'll be flying around. Yes. 참 사랑은 최고 스피드를 가지고 있기 때문에 광대한 225억 광년이나 되는 이 우주도 참 사랑을 가진 하나님은 꽁충꽁충 한 걸음으로 뛰어넘는 것입니다. So because true love moves at the highest speed, so even this universe, which is what is this 225억 광년, 22 billion light years. That's the number he gives here. even as the universe, which is 22 billion light years, um, God can just, because God has true love, he can just walk very quickly, just bump, 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 bump. And the same is true with you. Um, in the spirit world, no matter how large uh, a universe body, in other words, a father's universe body. I think he means planet or other sort of structure in the universe. No matter how large it may be, that these are all stages for your activity. That's January 21, 1991. And then March 11, 1990 here, he begins by saying, in the spirit world, you will not be jealous of anyone or anything. In other words, that's actually kind of an idiom in Korean, meaning that a person has everything they could possibly want. So to say that you're not jealous of anyone, you have everything you possibly want. Um, the mhm. A being of love can be compared with a diamond. Okay. All right. So praise God. So praise God, telling us what it's like in the spirit world. All right. I have a little piece of a Kleenex here because suddenly, just before we went on the air, I developed a little bit of a runny nose. Okay. All right. So let's see what is going on right now. And of course, President Trump looks like he's still in Davos. The Europeans, the Europeans are just ah. Not just President Trump, but also, others. For example, Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick is an interesting person. He's the Commerce Secretary, and usually Commerce Secretaries are pretty bland people. They don't go around knocking heads. They leave that to the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, maybe even the Secretary of the Treasury. But the Commerce Secretary, he's a salesman, and he goes around saying, "Oh, he didn't really mean that." But Howard Lutnick is very different, very different. Yes, he did mean that, and he meant more. For example, I think this is really classic where there were news reports that the Danish, what is it, pension fund was going to sell $100 million worth of U.S. Treasuries. Now, the U.S. Treasury market, all right, is something like $30 trillion. So I did the math, and $100 million, I figured, is like, for example, if someone had a house that was worth $300,000, um, if you say that, okay, what how would that compare? For example, if someone has how does $100 million compare to 30 trillion? And the way I would describe it is that if someone has a house that is $300,000, $100 million would be the equivalent of a penny, of a penny. All right. And so Howard Lutnick said, yes, he said the truth. That's irrelevant. And yeah, it is irrelevant. It is irrelevant. If someone comes along and says, "Oh, look, uh, I'm going to take a penny from you," so now take that, and you're going to say, "So what?" Right? Basically, Howard Lutnick said the same thing, that the Denmark is irrelevant. And then, of course, other nations, he was referring to the $100 million, obviously. And then other European countries came out and says, "Oh, how can you say that Denmark is irrelevant?" uh, so anyway, it sounds like they're having a real, real fun time up there in the mountains of Switzerland in Davos. Basically, uh, I don't know. It's anyway. And let's see, President Trump, and I don't know if this is happening right now or if it's just finished, but uh, President Trump, according to this, is or just recently was hosting a signing ceremony for the Board of Peace. And this was updated 38 minutes ago. Okay, here. President Trump hosted a signing ceremony for his proposed Board of Peace at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland on Thursday, the latest step in his effort to dismantle the post-war international system and build a new one with himself at the center. Well, so what many people are pointing out is that President Trump is not responsible for the collapse of the post-World War II economic system. This was mostly China's doing. Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, tried to blame it on Trump, saying that, without actually naming Trump, saying that, someone, we don't know who, but someone is tearing things down, basically what he said. But of course, Carney is completely in the pocket of Xi Jinping, and it's really sad to see Canada as a country also is pretty much in the pocket, seems, of a CCP, and I don't blame them for being concerned that Trump might invade them. It might be that he should. I don't know, but Canada is really in a terrible situation. They're trying to be European, even though they're in America, in the American continent. And also, Mr. Trump was set to meet in Davos with President Zelensky of Ukraine to try to advance a plan to end the war with Russia. And Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, were expected to meet later with the Russian leader, President Vladimir V. Putin, in Moscow. Okay. And also, Kushner presented an ambitious plan for rebuilding Gaza on stage at the Board of Peace event in Davos, Switzerland. Beginning in the envoy's enclave's south, Gaza will be rebuilt in phases, according to slides presented while he addressed the audience. We said, let's plan for catastrophic success, said Kushner. There's a master plan. We'll be doing it in phases. Kushner said he hopes the southern city of Rafah, which Israel largely razed during its military campaign against Hamas, can be rebuilt in 2 to 3 years. His slide suggests their entire plan for Gaza will require at least $25 billion in investment into the Palestinian enclave. It is not clear who will cough up the funding. And then also, as part of the President Trump's Board of Peace signing ceremony, Ali Shah, the leader of the U.S.-backed Committee of Palestinian Technocrats for Gaza, told attendees that the enclave's border with Egypt will open next week. The Rafah crossing has long been closed, trapping the vast majority of Palestine. And this was way before, the whole thing with Hamas and the whole attack on Israel, because Egypt has made it very clear over the years that it has absolutely no interest in allowing Palestinians to move into Egypt. So it's been open sometimes, closed sometimes, but Egypt has been very reluctant to keep that thing open for an extended period. The border is a lifeline for Gaza, Shah said. Under the terms of the ceasefire, Israel was obligated to reopen the Rafah crossing, but Israel has publicly opposed opening the border until Hamas returns the remains of the last hostages in Gaza, which the group has yet to do. And Kushner showed one slide titled New Gaza. And I think there's here we go, New Gaza. So here, I told you so. Look at this. All these, what is it? I don't know what those are. They look like, I don't know, condominiums, I suppose. Always, yeah. We have a real estate agent or real estate developer as president, and you can really see that, wherever he goes, he sees a plot of land. He wants to put condominiums there. And he tried something similar with North Korea back during his first term. And Kim Jong-un sort of smiled at it and sort of said nothing. Here it says energy and digital infrastructure, transportation hub, coastal tourism. Coastal tourism. Yes, okay. So this is on the coast of the Mediterranean, and Okay. Yep. I can see why they say 25 billion. Yep. We'll see. We'll see how this turns out. Yep. Yeah. And Steve Witkoff and Kushner are going to he talked about also Gaza, and but one country was notably absent from the Board of Peace signing ceremony, Israel, which has said it will join the body. Isaac Herzog, Israel's president, is in Davos, but his spokesman for Herzog confirmed that he was not participating in the ceremony, et cetera, et cetera. And let's see, also Trump indicated the U.S. will be speaking soon to the Iranian government. Iran does want to talk and will talk, Trump said, as he took credit for last year's strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Then also Kushner and Witkoff are going to Moscow soon. We're at the end right now. Witkoff told an audience on Thursday morning, adding that he was quite optimistic. And then also Zelensky's meeting there. And meanwhile, Denmark's prime minister told reporters on Thursday that Mark Rutte, NATO's Secretary General, cannot negotiate on behalf of Denmark or Greenland. The day before, President Trump said that he and Rutte were, well, New York Times, come on, were working on a deal that could resolve the dispute over Greenland. Also, the prime minister said in a statement that she had spoken with Rutte before and after his meeting with Trump and had coordinated with Greenland. All right, so let's take a look at that meeting, or what Rutte said about that meeting on Greenland. The top NATO official, that's Rutte, reveals details of stunning meeting with Trump that produced Greenland deal framework. And after President Donald Trump announced a new Greenland framework had been agreed upon with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the NATO chief told Fox News special report with Brett Baer, the U.S. forcibly taking control of Greenland from Denmark was not discussed during the meetings between him and Trump in Switzerland during the World Economic Forum. That issue did not come up anymore in my conversations with Mr. President. He's very much focused on what we need to do to make sure that that huge Arctic region, where change is taking place at the moment, where the Chinese and Russians are more and more active, how we can protect that, Rutte said, when pressed on the details. Trump said the agreement resulted in his decision to not impose tariffs scheduled to go into effect February 1. That was really the focus of our discussions, Rutte insisted. Okay. And Trump announced the new framework in a post on his social media site, Truth Social, Wednesday afternoon, while at the World Economic Forum this week. Based upon a very productive meeting that I had with Rutte, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region, Trump wrote. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland. Further information will be made available as discussions progress. And he said that Vance and Rubio and Witkoff will lead the negotiations and report directly to him. And then this paragraph is interesting. He's probably won't, that means will not, right? That's a future tense. We won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that, Trump said earlier in the morning at the World Economic Forum. Now everyone's saying, oh, good, that's probably the biggest statement I made because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. During the exclusive interview with Fox News, Rutte called Trump totally right about needing to shore up security in the Arctic region, noting that the chance of Russia or China becoming a threat in that region is increasing every day. The NATO Secretary General also praised Trump's leadership in getting other NATO countries to pay more money for the alliance's defenses. Okay. All right. So, it's pretty clear that President Trump is saying that listen, if current trends continue, either Russia or China is going to take control of Greenland and the Arctic region. And if that happens, America is going to have to go to war with whichever takes control. We don't want to do that. So we're going to go to war with Denmark. Go to war with Denmark. Well, not no. Um, threaten to go to war with Denmark, I guess. But he's just saying that, hey, come on, Denmark, you've got to help us avoid war with Russia and China, because we're trying to avoid World War III here, and so we need to get with the program. But territorial issues are very sensitive. There are a number of territorial disputes around the world. Japan and Russia have a territorial dispute. Four little islands off the coast of Hokkaido, sort of the northeast, of Hokkaido, that Russia has effective control over right now, and Japan insists should be theirs. And so, because of those four little islands, Japan and Russia have not signed a peace treaty officially ending World War II. Yeah. And of course, Japan and Korea, there's that little rock, in the middle of the ocean that is between the two, that is currently effectively occupied and administered by South Korea. And every time Japan says something about that, well, actually, it's a couple of islands, but basically two sort of rocks sticking out of the ocean. Every time Japan says something about it, Koreans left and right unite together to attack Japan. And territory is still a major thing in people's minds. And Father said that in the ideal world, there will be no international boundaries. And people ask me about that. Do you think there'll be any international boundaries? And I think there will be, but we need to look at the kinds of international boundaries that we're talking about. And I don't think that there will be these kinds of territorial disputes. That's for sure. Also, I think that we will not have sort of passport control or these customs and things like that. People will be able to pass much more freely between and among countries, kind of like going from one state to another in the United States right now, or maybe going from one country to another in the EU. That kind of situation, I think. But if you think about it, there's still going to be private property, right? That individuals will have private property. Okay, this is my land from here to here. Okay, and if you want to come in, there's a place. I have this, area where people can come in and out. So please use that exit. Don't come in through the window. Please come in through the door. And then individuals have their pieces of land. Okay, and then a group of individuals, each with their pieces of land, come together and they form what? They form maybe a village, let's say a village. And then villages come together to form a county or state, and then states, then nations, and then nations. So eventually, because there's private property on the individual level, there's going to be lines even on the national level. So the international level, there will be lines. There will be lines. So I think when Father says no international borders, I don't think he's denying that kind of international border. It's just that there will be borders that are based sort of from the bottom up, so to speak. For example, look at Africa. A big part of the problem in Africa is that their international borders were drawn by European powers back in the 19th century, without regard to tribal differences or cultural differences or even geographic situations, and so that's causing a problem even today. So I think this kind of thing with Greenland, if this sort of a territorial imperative sort of kind of thing can be transcended, it's going to be worked out one way or another. And there are a lot of smart people there. I'm sure they'll work out something. And President Trump's style is to come in with a punch and then sort of sit back and deal with the reaction. And eventually, he has a tendency to get what he aims for. Wow. he does have that. He does have that tendency. The art of the deal, I suppose. All right, let's see here. Let's see here. Let's take a look. Of course, this is the full text, basically, of President Trump's speech here. I don't think we need to go through the whole thing. Um, but he gave a speech there on Wednesday. He said he would not use force to acquire in his attempts to acquire Greenland, but still, he did say acquire Greenland. Right? And there's been a lot of effort in the international press, or especially the globalist press, to uh, try and join the European countries in ganging up against President Trump. And even when Wednesday there was a lot of volatility. You remember what I said about volatility, right? It's only volatility when it goes down. There was a lot of volatility in stock markets around the world. And so the press immediately said, look, President Trump is making the economies crash. Whereas in reality, professional economists looking at the situation said, no, 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 no. That this is not about Trump. This is about the Japanese bond market. Um, Prime Minister Takaichi, uh, you know, uh, has made very clear that she wants Japan to spend a lot more money, for the Japanese government to spend a lot more money. And also, she's talked about reducing the sales tax on food to zero. And that kind of talk, tends to uh, to drive down the price of bonds and drive up the yields. And when yields in Japanese bonds go up, that's a problem for the whole world because, as we've discussed a number of times, I think there is this thing called the Japan carry trade, where um, investors around the world go to Japan, borrow money and borrow funds at very low rates, and then take that money and go out someplace else and get good returns on it. For example, if they can borrow, say, at I don't know, 1% in Japan, for example, let's say they borrow $1 million at 1%. Then they turn around and they buy U.S. Treasuries with that $1 million. Then U.S. Treasuries will give them what now, 4% or something like that. So that's an easy way to make money, basically no risk at all. And that works until one of two things happens. One is that the U.S. Um, yields go down, or the Japanese yields go up. And the Japanese yields go up. And right now, both are happening, but especially on Wednesday, the Japanese bond market went up, especially the 40-year bond went to considerably above 4%. And so this caused people to say, whoa, wait a second, I have to sell the assets that I've been invested in with that money that I borrowed from Japan because it's no longer going to make sense for me. If Japan is going to be doing that, then I got to get out of this trade. And that affected of course, stock markets and bond markets around the world. But the media, they wanted somehow a reason to blame Trump for everything that goes bad. Who was it? Piers Morgan. What happened to him? He fell down or something like that. He was in the hospital, and he sort of jokingly blamed Trump for it. jokingly. But everyone, who are in a certain mindset, are trying to blame Trump for everything bad or everything that they don't like that's happening in their lives. So President Trump, people were concerned that he might run for a third term, but no, he's setting himself up with this board of peace as president of the world. Yes, he's not going to stop. He's not going to stop. when his current term ends. He's going to move on. He's going to give himself a promotion, president of the world. Yes, interesting, interesting, interesting. And I think Father, uh, I see Father's working with him, and um, we'll see how that works out. As long as President Trump can keep the faith and make sure that he stays on the course of righteousness, I think he's going to have a very good career beyond his current presidential office term of office. Okay. Let's see if can I go into the Washington Post here? Will they allow me to do that? Okay. I don't think they're saying anything important there. Okay. All right. All right. Let's take a look at what else is going on here. And Breitbart has a couple of interesting stories going on. Uh, CCP spy spigot exposed how U.S. visa program designed by Chinese spy lets Beijing funnel money into American elections. Is this still this is still Peter Schweizer's new book, right? Seemingly innocuous program to entice foreign investors became a massive operation for laundering foreign donations to American politicians, primarily Democrats. Are we talking about the paintings of what's his name, Biden, son Biden the son? Uh, the plot revolved around a program established by the 1990 Immigration Act called the Employment-Based Fifth Preference Visa. It was ostensibly intended to encourage foreign investors to put big money into American business and job creation. Well, President Trump is doing something like that too, isn't it? Foreigners who invested at least $1.05 million or $800,000 in certain economically distressed areas and created at least 10 American jobs were issued a green card and permanent resident status. Applicants under this fast-track program were subjected to very little scrutiny. In practice, the EB-5 program became a gateway to outrageous levels of foreign interference in American politics, and there are good reasons to believe it was designed that way from its inception. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I can read the book and read about that. And here, Senator Schmidt calls for the U.S. to get serious about expatriation for the Manchurian generation. We've talked about this a couple of times, right? Where Chinese mothers come over and have their babies in America. They get U.S. citizenship because they were born in the U.S., and then they take the babies back to China and then raise them in the school system of China so that they learn all about socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era with with Xi Jinping thought. And then they come back when they're 20 years old or 18 years old and start voting in American elections. Right. So in a post on X, Schmidt responded to a post from Breitbart News about how Schweitzer had uncovered a birth tourism pipeline that could produce more than 1 million U.S. citizens born in American territory but raised in communist China who will become eligible to vote in the U.S. elections by 2030. We need to get serious about expatriation for the Manchurian generation, Schmidt said. Allowing the system to stay in place is civilizational suicide. We will either become a sovereign nation once again, or we will sanction our own invasion. Interesting there. Korean media is beginning to take pay more and more attention on this move for U.S. to deny dual citizenship or multiple citizenships. I mean, some people have not just two passports, but multiple passports. And a lot of times it's rich people who are, want to make sure that they have options when things get tough. And but the big question, though, is with the case of multiple nationalities, how is America going to know what nationalities people have or don't have? Because right now, uh, unless the Korean government gives information to the United States, which I don't see happening, there's really no way for the U.S. to know. South Korea knows. South Korea knows. They've always kept a very close track of that, and basically, multiple nationalities are not allowed by South Korea uh, unless a person is more than 65 years old. Once you're 65, then you can, and if you were born as a Korean but became American, for example, naturalized American, then you can come back and regain your South Korean citizenship and keep your U.S. citizenship as long as you agree to certain conditions. All right. But the situation is not like that in the U.S. And Trump tells Davos big migration is bad economics, right? Okay. Let me share this with you again. Big migration, bad economics. Okay. And here, immigration agents sweep across Maine with police help despite Democratic governor's order to stop. And okay, and then Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg really trying desperately to remain politically relevant, which she's not. She's saying it's time to remove Trump with the 25th Amendment. And someone asked her, well, to do that, the cabinet has to cooperate, and the vice president has to cooperate. And her answer was, well, let's get rid of them too. Well, doesn't really work that way, Whoopi. It doesn't really work that way. The cabinet has to vote to uh, take the president down with the 25th Amendment. And obviously, the current cabinet is not going to do that with President Trump. So she's just blowing smoke, trying somehow to remain relevant, which she's not to begin with. I mean, she has a few good movies that we enjoy. What is it? The one where she's a Catholic nun. What's that? Sister something. And the other one that Ghost, I guess it is, right? Where she gets possessed by the spirit of Patrick Swayze. Pretty good comedies, and also that Ghost movie is and it's not too far off from depicting the reality of death. But anyway, Whoopi Goldberg, she's very old, trying to somehow stay in this circle, and I guess she has to have an income somehow. House Oversight Committee votes to hold Clintons in contempt of Congress because, yeah, they refused to come before Congress to answer questions about Epstein. Yes, they don't want to do that. I wonder why. Anyway, so we will see. We will see what happens with this. Will they go to jail because of their refusal? That's possible. That's possible. That's often the punishment for refusing a subpoena from Congress. And an Indian couple arrested for selling drugs and prostitutes at a roadside hotel. If you've traveled around the United States, which a lot of us have, um, you may have noticed that almost every Motel 6 or was it Super 8 or a lot of these motels have been taken up by Indians, especially people with a certain. Okay, no, this is not that. Okay, I was thinking it was another last name because most of them have the same last name even, and I've talked about how that happened. But this is not that last name. An Indian couple was arrested for their involvement in allowing illegal activities such as the selling of drugs and prostitution to occur in their roadside hotel in Virginia. Where, I wonder, in Virginia? Which one was this? Where in Virginia? Where in Virginia? Was it on Red Carpet Inn? Red Carpet Inn. Okay, yeah. So Red Carpet Inn is another one of those, just like Motel 6 or Super 8. Right. Well, this happens from time to time in these places, and you have to watch out for this. Right? I guess they weren't making enough money just doing the honest business, so they needed to do something extra. All right, let's see here. Uh, there's moral imperative in not cooperating with the feds on immigration enforcement networks. So these people, so they're still very, President Trump's term as president has certainly been exciting. We knew that from the beginning, and there's not a dull moment in his term, that is for sure. Yeah. And let's see here. There's with Rutt there, and they're both smiling. And here, Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, trashes the USA after selling out to China. But like President Trump said in Davos this time, without the US, Canada would not be a country in the first place. So come on, give us some credit here. So Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, fresh from toadying to communist dictatorship of China, slammed the United States in his address to the globalist World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland on Tuesday. Carney, whose extensive business ties to China, yes, even before he was prime minister, he had developed a lot of business ties with China, were overlooked by Canadian voters in his run for prime minister, traveled to Beijing last week for an obsequious meeting with dictator Xi Jinping, ostensibly eager to prove that Canada doesn't have to rely on the US trade. Carney abandoned Canada's protections against Chinese electric vehicle dumping and agreed to swallow his criticisms of China's human rights abuses and cut deals with the country he formerly described as the greatest threat to Canadian national security. Yes, even last year, he was saying that China is the greatest threat to Canadian national security on video. But now, boy, I guess they met his number. Yeah, I guess the Chinese met his number. He sounded like he was reading a few lines from Beijing's playbook in his address to the World Economic Forum, complaining that great powers have begun using economic integration as a weapon and tariffs as leverage. Here we go. Yeah, we are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Recently, great powers have begun using, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, he's blaming Trump here without naming Trump, but it was actually China that ruptured the post-war economic system or the whole world order, and now President Trump is making sure that whatever comes about now is not going to be centered on Xi Jinping. China has persistently directed both of those complaints against the United States since Trump returned to office, even though China's entire geopolitical strategy is premised on using economic integration as a weapon and tariffs as leverage. Canadians will receive a rude reminder of this if a future prime minister takes a position Beijing disapproves of, and China cuts off Canada's supply of critical minerals to bring Ottawa back in line. Now, I like President Trump's statement where he said that Europe has decided to go with windmills, right? Windmills, and the wind energy and other energy, even though, as President Trump says, even though Europe does not produce any batteries. So what use are windmills if you're not producing batteries? You're getting the batteries from where? From China. So you're setting yourself up for failure. He said this about, years ago about the oil, right? He told Germany, don't depend on Russia for your oil. And what did Germany do? They laughed at him. Nothing's going to happen. Yeah. Well, now, Germany's in a position where, on the one hand, they're saying all sorts of things about Russia attacking Ukraine and everything like that. But on the other hand, they're still forced to buy oil from Russia and gas, oil and gas. So yes, that's the Europeans will never learn, apparently. And also the people in the United States who are allied with the Europeans also, pretty much the same thing goes with them. Okay? I think going all the way back to Alexander Hamilton, I think there's always been sort of a group of people in America who think that Europe has always had it right, and America also needs a kind of an aristocracy, in other words, a professional political class to govern the nation, and the people don't really know what they're doing, and especially recently, since I guess since FDR, or maybe even going back further, that has been very prominent in America. And people like, Hillary Clinton, I think, is probably one of the best examples of Obama. I think he took advantage of this. Um, but Hillary Clinton was an example of someone who, when she was in college, she decided, okay, I'm going to become part of that class, and I'm going to take over the governance of this country. And in order to do that, she found herself a husband who would sort of help her climb the ladder of political success, and she did that, and closed her eyes to all sorts of all the philandering that was going on because he served a useful purpose for her, and well, now she's being uh, subpoenaed to Congress to answer questions about Epstein Island, together with her husband. Yeah. So yeah, karma. I guess that's the word. That's the word that people like to use. All right, let's see here. Uh, Argentinian President Milei says that Christian values are key to save the West. Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Judeo-Christian values key to saving the West. I'm not so sure about Roman law, but anyway, let's take a look at here. Or Greek philosophy for that matter. Yeah, certainly Christian values, Judeo-Christian values. Let's see what he said here. President of Argentina, Javier Milei, warned at the World Economic Forum in Davos Wednesday that the West must once again embrace Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Judeo-Christian values to escape our dark present. He spoke at Davos for the third time as head of state, having delivered a seething condemnation of socialism in his 2024 speech and a fierce rejection of woke ideology as an epidemic that must be cured and a cancer that must be eradicated in his 2025 speech. The Argentine president, who once again condemned socialism throughout his speech, referred to his previous two addresses at the WEF and said that unlike those two occasions, 2026 is the year in which he brought good news. The world has begun to wake up. Yeah, because President Trump is bashing them on the head. And the best proof of this is what is happening in America and the rebirth of ideas of freedom, he stated. Milei opened his speech by declaring Machiavelli is dead, stressing that for years our thinking was distorted by presenting us with a false dilemma when designing public policies where we had to choose between political efficiency and the ethical and moral values of the West. Therefore, the opposition between the dimensions of efficiency and fairness is false and erroneous. That is, what is fair cannot be inefficient, nor can what is efficient be unfair. From the perspective of dynamic analysis, fairness and efficiency are two sides of the same coin. Let's take a look at that a little bit more. The opposition between the dimensions of efficiency and fairness is false. Okay. So I guess he's saying this is a false dichotomy, efficiency and fairness. What is fair cannot be inefficient, nor can what is efficient be unfair. Mm. I wouldn't say that. I mean, Hitler was pretty efficient in killing, 6 million people by putting them in showers of poison gas and so forth. That was quite efficient. But that was certainly unfair. So I'm not sure I understand what he's saying here. Milei warned that setting aside ethical and moral values leads to policies that are not only unjust, but also lead to social and economic collapse to such an extent that it could end up destroying Western civilization itself. Setting aside ethical and moral values leads to policies that could end up destroying. Okay, we can agree with that. He referred to his 2024 and 2025 speeches, where he denounced socialist policies elegantly packaged to deceive people of noble souls, full of good intentions, but with the same catastrophic results as always. And I think maybe he's talking about New York, probably, but maybe he didn't have that in mind, but it's probably, yeah, he's talking about New York. Without going any further than the continuous disasters caused by socialism during the 20th century, let us look at the aberrant damage caused in Venezuela, not only by an 80% drop in its GDP, but even worse in light of the establishment of a bloody narco dictatorship whose terrorist tentacles spread throughout our continent, Milei said. California, too. California, right? We talk about the drop in GDP in California. Now, the billionaires are leaving, the large companies are leaving, and Newsom is being left holding the bag there. He warned that in the face of the ethical and moral degradation of the West caused by embracing socialist agendas, it is necessary to revive the ideas of freedom, stressing that unlike the utilitarian approach taken in the past, the defense of capitalist free enterprise must be based on its ethical and moral virtues. Mm-hmm. So we must return to drawing inspiration from Greek philosophy, embrace Roman law. Well, that's because Argentina comes from the Spanish background, and Spanish law obviously is based on Roman law as opposed to the common law of the United Kingdom. And U.S. law is based mostly on the common law rather than Roman law. So maybe law professors in the U.S. would sort of have a question about this emphasis on Roman law. But I suppose it's better than Sharia law. That's for sure. That's certainly true. And return to Judeo-Christian values, which will enable us to save the West, Milei urged. Okay. Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Judeo-Christian values. Mm-hmm. The Argentine president detailed the achievements attained by his administration, such as the elimination of a 15% GDP fiscal deficit, 15% to GDP, I guess that is, lowering annual inflation from 300 to 30%. Yes, he actually has done a pretty good job. Reducing poverty from 57 to 27% and growing Argentina's economy were done by implementing public policies guided by ethical and moral values. He emphasized that his administration's deregulation ministry, led by Federico Sturzenegger, has carried out 13,500 reforms to the Argentine state, which has allowed Argentina to have a more efficient and dynamic economy that allows the country to grow again. In English, he said that this is make Argentina great again, when they pointed out that despite popular criticism, free enterprise capitalism does not undermine moral values, and reiterated his opening statement, Machiavelli is dead, therefore it is time to bury him. And he concluded his speech by reflecting upon this week's Jewish Torah portion, the Parshat Bo, which describes the moment when Moses confronts the Pharaoh, which Milei described as the symbol of the oppressive power of the state, to warn him that if he did not free the Hebrew people, the last 3 plagues would fall upon Egypt. When Pharaoh refused, the plague of locusts came, signifying famine. Then came the plague of darkness, signifying the loss of clarity for decision-making. And finally, the plague of death of the firstborn, revealing the fate of a society that denies freedom. The analogy with what is happening today is clear. That's interesting. Okay, that's interesting. That's something new. Some time ago, for some strange reason, the West began to turn its back on the ideas of freedom, which is why in this very place in 2024, I stated that the West is in danger as a result of having embraced increasing doses of socialism in its most hypocritical form, which is wokeism, he stressed. In turn, in 2025, I explained the mental parasites that the left sowed in humanity. However, 2026 is the year in which I bring you good news. The world has begun to wake up. Yes, okay. And he says, America will be the beacon of light that will reignite the entire Western world and thereby repay its debt to civilization with expressions of gratitude to its foundations in Greek philosophy, Roman law, Judeo-Christian values. We have a better future ahead of us, but that better future will only exist if we return to the roots of the West. That is, by returning to the ideas of freedom. So, World Economic Forum now, I guess something like 56 years old or something like that. Started in the early 1970s. Interestingly, around about the same time that Father started the International Conference on the Unity of the Sciences, where possibly many of these same ideas were being discussed. Um, but unfortunately, the ICAS conferences are no longer being held. For one thing, it cost a lot of money, and World Economic Forum too costs a lot of money. But I think people are paying there. I think I read somewhere that to get a ticket, you have to pay something like $30,000 or something for the ticket. And ICA's father was paying the whole thing, and um, well, that was not a sustainable model, was it? No. So, but it is important, I think, though, that World Economic Forum or something like it be developed where we go back and merge back into Father's model. The themes relate to God. For Father, every year he gave a motto or sort of theme that began with absolute value and this, absolute value and that. Every year, the first two words were absolute value, which was, a code word for God, and I think that was pretty clear with everyone. Um, so World Economic Forum is sort of morphing into that kind of thing. Right? And right now, President Trump, as I think I mentioned on Tuesday, has invited something like 60 countries to this Board of Peace. And this Board of Peace may be becoming a kind of a able UN type thing, except that, as I mentioned on Tuesday, China has been invited. And for it to be a able UN, it would have to exclude communist countries like China, especially China, definitely China. You can't have an able UN where China is a member. Yeah. At least not the Chinese Communist Party as a member. Maybe after CCP, in the post-CCP world, we can have China. Obviously, we would have China as a member then, but not now. Uh, so we'll see. We'll see. But right now, uh, Israel is accepted, but I think other than that, we saw on Tuesday that really none of the sort of the big names have accepted. So let's see who has accepted. Let's see which countries have accepted to be on the board of peace with Trump. Let's see here. Yeah, it's still CBS 25. Okay, Canada, all right, Canada, despite itself, Canada has accepted. And Egypt, but you look at this, Azerbaijan, Kosovo, United Arab Emirates, Belarus, Morocco, Hungary. These are not, big hitters. Let's see here, The Hill, 19 hours ago. Let's see what they're saying here. Do we have anything more than 25? 59 nations are in play. Okay, I guess that means someone has rejected. They invited 60. France, Norway, and Sweden have already publicly declined their invitations, citing concerns for infringing on the United Nations. Others have signed on to the agreement to work alongside Trump to quell violence in the region. So France, Norway, and Sweden don't want to be a part of it. Argentina has accepted. Okay, Belarus, and let me just. We don't have a lot of time here, but let me just put these on. Show you these. Okay. Morocco, Vietnam. Okay. Well, that's a communist country, isn't it? Okay. Um, Pakistan, mhm, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kosovo, Hungary, UAE, Egypt, Turkey, Qatar, Jordan, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia. Mm, yeah, that's all that we have right now. Also, Israel, Bahrain, Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan have also signed on to join the Board of Peace. Okay, well, we'll see how this thing evolves. Still don't like that China was even invited in the first place, but I think the saving grace is that we know that Xi Jinping will never submit himself to President Trump. So I would be very, very surprised if they accepted the invitation, which is a good thing. We don't want them on that, or I don't think Trump should want them on that. But Canada, right? And Vietnam. What's Vietnam doing on that? Anyway, so God bless. God bless Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.